So let's talk footwear. I think there are 4 main bits of footwear that you need for the mountain or for the expedition. And you will need some of them at some parts and others. So I'm going to go from my right, your left, to my left, your right. So flip-flops around Kathmandu and in the showers in the tea rooms, or you know, just pottering around base camp. I'd certainly recommend taking a pair of flip-flops. Take something that's lightweight, you can kind of carry in your bag, potentially between the tea rooms. So your grip, your kind of big hold all is probably going to go ahead of you on yaks, or it might be behind you. So when you get to the tea rooms on the trek, for example, it's nice to be able to jump into a pair of flip-flops, let your feet air. But also in the tea rooms, you'll probably find in the shared bathrooms, the floors are a bit gross. So it's nice to have a pair of flip-flops, can kind of get you around between meals and kind of in the mornings and the evenings and stuff like that. I've also got a pair of those Source sandals. So depending on various trips, I'll take either a pair of flip-flops or Source sandals or something. Whatever's comfortable on your feet, I would take those. They don't have to be super expensive or mega posh, but these were actually like $10 in Kathmandu a few years ago. I've lasted about 4 years. So whatever you need in your feet there. I then also took a pair of trainers. These were great for pottering around when we had a kind of acclimatization and rest days in Namche Bazaar. I used them in base camp pretty much exclusively as my footwear for cutting around in base camp. Base camp, if you've not been before, it is on a massive rocky moraine on the side of the Khumbu Glacier. It is mega abrasive rock. You probably can't see on the camera, but it's kind of started to shred the corner of these shoes. I chose a Gore-Tex pair of trainers to take as well, because if it does snow in base camp, it kind of helps keep your feet dry. Or if you're pottering around the towns, the villages when you're on the trek or on your acclimatization rest period, Gore-Tex trainer is quite useful to have. Some people choose to hike in this kind of thing as well, or in a hiking shoe of some sort. That personally, I don't like that. I like to have really stable ankles, so I always go with a kind of trekking boot, which I'll talk about in a moment. But if that's you, if you're a hiker, you know, just be aware that if you're hiking in trainers, the rock in the trails are really quite abrasive. So I would try and have something with really good rubber around the front, with a good thick deep tread, and something that is going to be comfortable on your foot with some stability around the ankle. I wouldn't personally trek in these. I think they would get shredded within about a week, and they don't give a lot of protection on the lower forefoot as well. And to be honest with you, the whole bit about getting to base camp and getting there is about getting there safely, avoiding sickness and injury all the way. So maximise that process of avoiding injury, or to maximise that process of avoiding injury, I use trekking boots. But yeah, a pair of Gore-Tex trainers are really helpful. Cut around Kathmandu when it's really wet and lashing down with rain, because at the end of the trip it'll be coming to monsoon season. So a pair of Gore-Tex trainers. My trekking boots are actually probably overkill, definitely overkill for the trek, but they're what I have. I use them for everything. I use these are the La Sportiva Evo something, I think, I can't remember what they're called now. I bought these about a year ago and they are mega. It's the best pair of boots I've bought, I think. They do take a crampon, so they're quite useful for me. I live here in Chamonix, so I use them up to about 4,000 meters. I use them for snowshoeing, I use them for summer trekking, I use them for absolutely everything. They've got a really aggressive sole, really good ankle support, and I've gone for the leather ones instead of the kind of synthetic, because I find leather is just more comfortable from a breathing perspective and tends to be a bit more robust. The insoles are just the stock insoles that come with them, but they're pretty reasonably thick and they're warm. A really good boot. You don't have to go for something like this. You could go for just a normal trekking boot. It could be cheap as chips if you want as well, if you're just going to bin them at the end of the trip. But like I said, the same with the trainers and the trekking boots. If you're going to, when you are trekking, the trails are pretty robust. The rock is quite hard. Certainly between, say, Le Boucher and base camp, you're trekking on the moraine and it can smash up shoes pretty quickly. So I would make sure there's a really good rubber rand, on whatever you're using for your trek. Yeah, the La Sportivas, I'm really pleased with these. I think they're a great bit of kit. But any good trekking boot will be perfectly suitable. So if you're like, oh my God, I don't have that, just whatever you have, whatever you're comfortable in for trekking, then just go with those. But for me, boots are important for the trek because I like to protect my ankles. And then in the tea rooms, I kind of alternate between these depending on how I'm feeling at any one time. And high on the mountain, there's a number of choices. For me, I went for the Miele Everest boots. I think they were once called the One Spot, something like that. But essentially, it's the Miele boot. You'll find there are 3 or 4 main sets of boots that people go for. There's the Miele, which I chose. La Sportiva do a boot called, the name escapes me, it doesn't matter, but La Sportiva do an 8,000 meter boot. You know, there's a lower pair that are done, one of the guys had those. There is a pair made by Scarpa, and there are a couple of Chinese makes that are really popular as well, and the names escape me at the moment. I'll put them in the notes at the bottom. So for me, I tried the Miele's and the La Sportivas. The La Sportivas are by far the most popular boot on the mountain. Almost everybody, when you look at the photos, have the yellow La Sportiva, whether they be the latest model or models gone by. They are the most popular. Followed probably closely by the Miele, and they're the majority of the boots on the mountain. You might find there's the odd Scarpa. We had a couple of people in our team had Scarpas. You might find there's the odd Chinese brand, etc. The Kalas, I think they're called. There's all kinds of brands out there, but these and the La Sportivas are the most popular, certainly with Western climbers. They're also the easiest to get hold of, to be honest. You'll find these in most of the big climbing shops in Europe. You can probably get hold of them, and probably North America. There's a Miele shop in Chamonix, which is super convenient for me, and then some of the other shoe shops, they just ordered them in for me, basically. I tried the La Sportivas on, and I found them not particularly comfortable, so just be aware of the new BOA system. There were a number of people on the mountain using that new system, and they found that they couldn't really micro adjust the boot to fit. It was kind of crank it on the foot, crank it on the ankle, and there was a number of people who had rubbing issues with the new La Sportivas. So bit of Compeed or tape, but in general they fitted better than other boots. So you're never going to get a perfect fit. I mean, even with these, for me, I've had some insoles fitted by a local ski boot fitter here, and you could do the same yourselves. But you're not going to break these boots in. You kind of need to break your feet into the boots, like lots of big mountaineering boots. But for me, the Miele's were great. I really like the rubber round. They're mega warm. The inners in them are really comfortable as well. Easy to kind of open and close, which is really important when you're on the mountain, because obviously you're going to be cold. You know, gloves on, etc. And what I particularly like about these, is that if you are cold, you have this lace system in here, so you can micro adjust the boot a bit. But what I particularly like is if you're cold and tired and you just need to crank the boot on, this strap here, it's got a little buckle on the side. You can do it with the strap and you're pretty much in there. The inner boot itself, I'll just pull this out. The inner boot is really comfy as well. It has a little bit of a sole on the bottom. The laces do it really easily. It has its own insole, but like I said, I had some made by a company called Sole Boot Lab here in Chamonix. They look ridiculous, but actually they were mega comfortable, and they stopped my toes from pressing against the end of the boot, which really helps. And actually going to a good boot fitter helped me as well to select the right size. In terms of sizing on these boots, you probably want them, you want them a little bit roomy, not massive room. Like you just need maybe enough room for your toes to expand. The trouble, some people will buy like 2 sizes too big. I really don't recommend that, because there are a couple of things that happen. On a descent, if you've got loads of room at the front of the boot, your foot will slide and you'll be smashing your toes into the front of the boot. And then on the climb, you'll find that your feet are a bit sloppy, and so you don't have that kind of feel with the ground and the climbing. That said, don't get them snug, because if they're too snug and your feet swell high up, then you've got a higher risk of frostbite. So it's quite important that you get them the right fit, and only you will know that when you're going through them. You'll see people on the mountain as well in base camp will wear these for walking around the camps. I absolutely don't do that because they get shredded, and these you want to protect. This is where the majority of the warmth comes from. And what you can do is you can buy some down booties, which I talk about actually in one of the other videos when I'm talking about sleeping bags and sleeping system. put the down booties on straight over some dry socks. Then you can put those straight into your shells. I'll probably show that as well later in another video. When you walk around camp then in warm feet, proper shell boots on, you know, with a good sole. Two things, it stops you from trashing the inners, but also having these on your feet mean that if you're on ice or snow, you've got a much lower chance of taking a slip and slipping off anything or falling over. It works as a system, it works really well. So they're the boots. Socks, so with my trainers, I literally just wear either a pair of running socks or just some you know, cotton, thin cotton socks, mainly because that's all that fits inside the shoe. With my trekking boots, again, general trekking socks, depending on the temperature, I'd choose like a thicker pair or a thinner pair. I had about 3 pairs of these, maybe a bit more, just so that I had a dry pair, a kind of clean pair, and something that might be being washed or dried. So I always had clean and dry socks, or at least dry socks, they weren't necessarily always clean. And then in my high mountain boots, I had 3 pairs of these. These are the Smartwool mountaineering socks. I've used these a lot. I've used them in Greenland, cycling the Arctic Circle in winter. I've used them here in Chamonix, sort of above 4,000 meters in different boots. And now I've used them on Everest. And I would say that these are more than enough for me personally. I didn't use any vapor barrier socks. I didn't use any liners. I just don't like having anything other than 1 pair of socks on my feet. I did try the Lorpen synthetic thick expedition socks, but they were way too sweaty for me and my feet just ended up soaked. But these are, for me, trusty go-to socks. I had 3 pairs, so I had 2 that I wore sort of whenever I had these boots on. I wore a pair of these. So kind of between base camp, camp 1, camp 2, and camp 3 on the rotations, I had 1 dry and 1 on my feet. And each night I took the ones off my feet, dried them in my sleeping bag, put the dry socks on that night. So I had dry feet in my sleeping bag. Don't make the mistake of having wet feet in your sleeping bag with your feet then at the end of your sleeping bag pressed against your tent, because you get frostbite. So dry socks, and then on really cold nights I then put some little down booties over those as well. And so yeah, on summit day I actually had a brand new pair that I put on at camp 4 ready for summit. Mistake number 1 that I'm going to declare here. I just bought the sock, I kept it in the packaging, and literally at camp 4 I took it out the packet and I put the brand new sock on. I think, and I don't know this, I'm happy to be corrected, but I think there's some sort of coating in the wool that that when the sock is new, whether it's a preservation thing, I have no idea, that meant that they absolutely stank by the time I got down to camp 3. And my feet were really warm, like my feet were sweaty. So I didn't have any dramas with heat or blisters or anything like that, but they absolutely stank. And that meant that when I got in my sleeping bag stank for the last few days, etc. So my recommendation would be buy a brand new pair of socks for your summit day. Really do, because it makes a big difference. You have all the kind of, you know, they're all lofted nicely, all the loops are beautiful and they're dead warm. But I'd give them at least 1 wash before you set off if you can, just to get rid of that nasty smell. It doesn't have to be at home. You could do that in a bowl or whatever at base camp. Made a difference. In terms of getting hold of this kit, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can buy everything at Kathmandu, like everything, even in Namche Bazaar. If you turn up in Namche Bazaar in your pants, you can buy everything for a summit of Everest or summit of any other 8,000 meter peak. So if you're worried about taking something like this with you because of baggage, and I ended up taking 40 odd kilos, I think it was in the end, you can rent these in Kathmandu. You can buy them as brand new boots, you can rent them as brand new boots, or you can buy used boots as well. There are literally 100 shops probably in Tamil within a square mile, and you will find a pair of boots in Kathmandu if you can't find them in your hometown. I was a little bit worried about that, which is why I bought them in advance. But in hindsight, genuinely, you can buy everything in Kathmandu. I don't recommend doing that, by the way, because you want to try these out. I trained in these beforehand. I went up onto the mountain where I hiked in them. I looked at Pillock because it was like 35 degrees and I'm using these massive 8,000 meter boots, but training them beforehand. Make sure your hiking boots are broken in and they're comfortable on your feet and you know that they work. But like I say, if you struggle or you lose your baggage or anything like that, it's all available in Kathmandu, so don't worry too much. If there are any questions on footwear, again, just hit me up in the comments at the bottom of the video on YouTube, or you find me on Facebook as well, either as Mountain Mindset or as Paul Spackman. Drop me a note. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. But that's footwear for now. I'll cover off down booties when I'm talking about down suit, sleeping bag and stuff. But by all means, fire any questions. I hope this is useful, and look out for the next section of this video as we go. Thanks very much.